Welcome into a trade deadline edition of the Territory Talk podcast, the official podcast of the Florida Panthers, presented as always by Baptist Health, the official sports medicine provider of the Florida Panthers. A busy deadline day, a busy lead up to the deadline, and I think at the end of it all, we look at this Florida Panthers team. They're deeper at every position here as the deadline has passed. The deadline, 3 p.m. Friday. We're recording this a little after the deadline has come and gone. The Panthers better post-deadline, deeper post-deadline, more equipped for a repeat Stanley Cup run post-deadline than they were pre-deadline. And it was a pretty good team, pretty darn good team pre-trade deadline. But Bill Zito doing some good work, some good business leading up to the trade deadline. We'll hear some sound from him coming up in just a little bit. Doug Plagens, Jameson Olive here with you as always, breaking it all down. The headline here, the most recent news, a man who was front and center on the other side of the Panthers-Bruins rivalry the last couple of years and has been a fixture in Boston for a long time, and their captain most recently and a member of that 2011 Stanley Cup team in Boston. Brad Marchand is now a Florida Panther. Jameson Olive, have you wrapped your head around this one yet?
It's crazy. It's wild. It is the most out of left field thing I think a lot of us could have imagined. One, because you don't know if Brad Marchand's available. Obviously, the name gets kicked around going into this deadline.
Future Hall of Famer and only on one team.
Yeah, and people, his name was thrown out there, but you don't think about that for the Panthers, obviously. And then you find out not only is he coming to the Panthers, but all the Panthers are giving up is a conditional second round pick in 2027. Crazy. It's a great deal for the Cats. It's a deal you make every time. And obviously, let's just remind fans here once again, too, because obviously it's a big name we're getting, but at the same time, it's not the 100-point, Brad Marchand of old. It's the one that's now evolved into a great player that I think is going to fill a great role here with the Panthers, whether it's on the top line, whether it's on the second line, whether he's on the top power play unit. Obviously, he's still a great penalty killer. We don't know where he's going to play yet, but wherever he does, he's going to do great. And the funniest thing is, yes, he's hated playing against Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk, but you know what? He's going to love playing with them. They're going to be fast friends. It's going to be
Four
great.
Nations face-off. Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand look pretty good together on the line.
They did, and I can't wait to see how this looks. Obviously, he's week to week right now. We don't know when he's coming back from that injury, but regardless, sounds like obviously both him and Tkachuk will be ready come playoffs. That's all that matters. I don't know how you can't say the Panthers aren't tied for the biggest winners of the deadline. Obviously, the Dallas Stars get Mikko Rantanen, and we'll get to other teams here in a minute. But once again, anytime there's an opportunity to make news, Bill Zito and the Florida Panthers are making news. This is a forward-facing team. This is a team with no fear that is always out there. So before we keep talking about the biggest move here, let me quickly run down basically the full week of deals here for the Florida Panthers. Not individual deals.
Then I want to get to another thing on Brad Marchand in just a minute.
For sure.
We'll run through the whole shopping list.
But this is the total in and out for the Florida Panthers here over the last week. So this is the in. This is what's come into the Panthers here during this week. In Brad Marchand, Seth Jones, who signed through 29-30. Let's not forget that's a long-term fix here. Nico Sturm, Vitek Vanacek, Kaapo Kakkonen, a 2026 fourth-round pick, and a 2027 seventh-round pick. And going the other way, leaving the Panthers, is Spencer Knight, Patty Giles, Chris Drieger, a 2026 fourth-round pick, a 2026 first-round pick, conditions there, and a 2027 second-round pick, conditions there. That's the one that went to Boston for Brad Marchand. So that's amazing. That's great. The Panthers made themselves such a better team for this year's Cup run, but then you throw in a guy like Jones who's going to be a part of this team for the next 5 years after this. For what I just listed as they had to give up, it's incredible. Incredible bit of business by Bill Zito and the Panthers. And obviously things can always happen. You never know how things are going to work out. But in terms of putting your team in a position to succeed, no one's done a better job than Bill Zito.
And we will have the sound from Bill Zito coming up shortly, Jameson. And I want to get to a thought here on Marchand, and then we'll get to a thought on the big picture. And we could go just move by move and talk a little bit about what it means getting Vitek Vanacek, Nico Sturm, for example, guys like that into the fold. But Jameson, first thing, you look at Brad Marchand, and going off a point that you made, he may not be the 100-point Brad Marchand now, but he also doesn't need to be. And he comes to the Panthers, he can supplement an already championship quality roster. He's got championship pedigree. He knows what it takes to win. He's played a ton of huge games over the course of his career. He's been in the final multiple times, and he can come here and play a role. and he doesn't need to be the best Florida Panther every single night. He may have a game in the playoffs where he is the Panthers' best player. That's entirely possible because we've seen him raise his game come playoff time so many times over the last decade plus. But he comes into a position where he can be a complementary part of the roster. And if he winds up, for example, and we don't know how this is all going to shake up, there are a lot of moving parts, but for example, if he winds up on a line with Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk, could you imagine what that'll look like? If he winds up playing with somebody else, he's going to be effective no matter what. He is a great penalty killer. And the other thing, Jameson,
as if the Panthers didn't have enough shorthanded goals already. He's
exactly. And Brad Marchand, like Matthew Tkachuk, like Sam Bennett, he comes with, there's an aura. It's more than just the talent. When he hits the ice for warm-ups, teams look across center ice and they say, we got to deal with that guy. And it's more than just dealing with the good hockey player, Brad Marchand. It's the overall game, the total package that comes along with them. And you throw that in with the DNA of this Panthers team, it fits. It makes sense. And that's a big thing that Bill Zito's done. I heard a conversation Bill Zito had on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio a few days back, and he mentioned with this Panthers dressing room, the dressing room is so strong. You bring a guy over from an arch rival type of team and some of the heated battles that the Panthers and Bruins have had the last few years, and you just know this Panthers team wants to win, and they know that Brad Marchand's a winner. And you slide him into this locker room. I have no doubts that this is just going to be a seamless transition. It's going to take people not only here in South Florida, but across the entire hockey world a while to get used to Brad Marchand being in a different uniform. That's going to be a strange sight. It's going to be kind of like when we saw Steven Stamkos throw on a Nashville Predators jersey for the first time back in the preseason. It's going to take some getting used to see Brad Marchand in something other than black and gold in the National Hockey League. But this is going to be a seamless transition in my mind, and A+ across the board for Bill Zito. And it leads to my next point here, Jameson. This was a big thing that I hammered home after the Seth Jones trade. To be able to get a guy like Seth Jones, and you didn't have to disrupt the every night roster. That was a huge win for the Panthers. And in mentioning what you laid out there, the Panthers were able to get Seth Jones, Brad Marchand, Nico Sturm, Vitek Vanacek, Kaapo Kähkönen, deeper at every position. And they gave up Spencer Knight, who was the backup goalie.
Yep.
Chris Drieger, who was the backup goalie on Monday night.
Yep.
And Patrick Giles, who gave the Panthers some good minutes early in the year, but we hadn't seen him since the early part of the season. The Panthers supplemented the roster and made an already championship quality roster better and deeper at every position without giving up anything from the every night lineup.
Yeah, I know fans always say they want there's always that thing on, Twitter where build the statue now whenever Bill Zito does a trade. I'm not satisfied with that anymore, Doug. I want to take my car and drive down Bill Zito Boulevard on the way to the arena.
Street name.
Before I get to the statue. I need to feel the love before I even get to the building. But no, in all seriousness, though, you also got to talk about the hunger that Brad Marchand is going to come in here with. Obviously, you remember him lifting the Stanley Cup, but that was his second year in the league, Doug. That was 2011. That was a lifetime ago. Now, here he is coming to the Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions at 36 years old. That window's closing. This could be his last shot. He's going to give 1,000% to make this happen with the Panthers, and you love to see that. And we keep mentioning it, he's not a 100-point Brad Marchand anymore, but he was second on the Bruins in scoring. He had 47 points. He had 21 goals.
We saw what he did in those two playoff series the last couple of years. Yep. He was very good in both of those.
And as you mentioned, he had to be the guy there a lot for Boston. And if you look at just production, he had to be their second most important forward after David Pastrnak. And in terms of pressure, he was probably their most important because he's the captain. He's got the C on his jersey. Now he comes to the Panthers, and he's what, the fifth or sixth most counted upon forward right now, maybe seventh. He's going to a place where he is going to feel so comfortable, get to settle in, and just be one of the guys trying to win a Stanley Cup. And it's going to be awesome.
Like Seth Jones, his minutes probably be a little bit lower than what he would have been used to in other places, which means you're going to get a fresher shift-to-shift Brad Marchand.
And he's coming off an injury, so that's going to be key, keeping those minutes down. But to me, one of the other funny kind of caveats about all this is obviously, like we said, him and Matthew Tkachuk both injured right now. you have to assume they're going to get to know each other rehabbing for a little bit here with the Cats. They're going to be best buds by the time they both get back on the ice together. But no, I don't think there's much else you can say other than just, another home run swing here for the Panthers. They've hit it out of the park a lot, and you feel like initially Bill Zito made good contact here, so we'll see how far this ball flies. The
Bill Zito GM of the Year award, and we've been campaigning for it. We've been banging that drum for a while.
Jim Nill, people say how nice he is, and I bet him he is very nice. But he's won 2 in a row. Is he so nice that he can tell people to stop voting for him? Be like, give my buddy Billy Z one.
Bill probably should have a couple on the mantle by now, but
he's got a lot of other trophies.
Yes, and I'm sure the big silver one from June 24th. I'm sure that's his favorite one. But we'd love to see him get a GM of the Year award here at some point. Do you want to get to the Bill Zito sound, or do you want to run through the rest of the shopping list?
Let's get to Bill Zito here. So this is some excerpts from Bill Zito's press conference here with the Panthers after trade deadline, talking about obviously the Brad Marchand move, but also just the deadline as a whole here for the Panthers.
Here we go.
Bill, starting with Brad, obviously following a trend of what we've seen here recently, what do you think he can bring to this team coming from a position where he had to be one of the top guys in Boston and now fitting in with a really deep group here in Florida at this point in his career?
I think he might be one of the top guys too. I mean, he's if you watch the Four Nations, he was pretty effective. We think he's still got some gas in the tank. He's a dynamic player. He's a multifaceted attack, whether it's his skating, his grit, his skill, his hockey sense, his will to win, his compete. I know him through my experience with Tuukka Rask, who was my client and his teammate and friend, and speaks glowingly of his character. And he is a fun guy, and the guy you see on the ice is the guy that he is. So really looking forward to adding him to our mix. I think he fits in, and he too can fit in. We have lots of guys that can move around, even within a game. So it'll be fun to see how it all sorts out and where different players end up ultimately. And I suspect we'll see different schemes.
Sorry, Bill, just to follow up, because you touched on it there. We saw it last year, but you basically had 5 guys that rotated on that 4th line throughout the playoffs. What did you learn last year about the value of maybe those extra pieces come playoff time?
Yeah, it becomes, first of all, you have injuries, you have fatigue, you have matchups, and sometimes the coaches like to put just change is good for change. Every once in a while, you just want a different look, a different scheme. Maybe, I don't know, you ever move the furniture in your office around, right? Or like maybe that's a bad parallel, but that's it gives the coaches optionality. And with our team, not only can you go horizontally, but you can go vertically with a lot of these guys who have the ability to play in different places. So it's a tremendous asset.
Bill, could you give some insight on the Marchand trade? Was this someone you had looked at for a while? It came at the last second of the trade deadline, which so something must have happened there at the end.
I don't know what happened. It did happen late. So I've said this a couple times. When you do the pro scouting, obviously you know who Brad Marchand is, right? I mean, you played against him. You know him inside out. But our pro scouts, and I think today is also a celebration of the work these men have done. We've built this through pro scouting, and it's tireless. It's controversial. Our meetings are nothing short of a brawl sometimes, but it's passionate people who care about the Florida Panthers, who want to win, who work their tails off. Pretty bright. So in the course of your pro scouting, you're constantly evaluating, you're filing reports, and you're ranking, and you could call any GM in the league, I suspect, I'm pretty sure, and ask them about any player in the league, and within a minute, they'll tell you everything you want to know about that player, what their team thinks about him, his strengths, his weaknesses, and so it's an ongoing narrative for each player, and that's our job. So
I just wanted to ask, how happy are you that you were able to add a guy like Brad Marchand without losing a roster player, a prospect? I know you value draft picks, but and then I got to follow up.
It was important. A player like this, a player like Seth, like when these players become available and you have that need or that fit with your group, and you pursue it, in my mind. And we're thrilled. Yeah.
And Dom Sweeney was just talking about the condition. He said 25% of the playoff games, then he said 40. Could you clarify how that conditional second goes to a first?
Yeah, but it's 50% of the games played.
All games played or playoff games?
The playoff games.
So if he plays at 50%, it goes to a first?
Yeah.
Okay. And then just your forward depth now. Last year we talked about that fourth line where you had 5 guys, kind of, other than Stenlund, rotating in and out. Now you've got 2 centers and Nosek and Sturm, and then it just looks like you're pretty happy with your forward depth.
Yeah, we're thrilled with the forward depth, and again, I'll go back and sort of illustrate the nuance here is that a lot of those guys can go up, so it gives you the same type of depth and flexibility, a little bit higher in the lineup, which is something I think we enjoy already. Right? I don't know what you would characterize. I'll just use Anton as an example. Is he third line guy? Well, he can play with anybody, right? And then we always joke that, well, anybody can be a first line guy, it is because Barkey can play with anybody. So that was a joke. But yeah, so yes, we're happy with the depth and appreciate it.
Well, and just kind of adding to what George was referencing, Bill, you already had a team built before the trade deadline that could easily make it back to the Cup final. To be able to add depth at the forward position, to be able to add a Seth Jones to the back end, to add depth to the goalie position, how much stronger do you feel this team is today than even where you guys started at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I think Seth helps in the fact that he's going to be here for a while, and then we have him for a term. That's a big part of that equation. It was a tall payment that we made, and we'll see. Like it's I don't know. I said a couple of days ago. It's not necessarily the addition and the total of the value of your assets that determines who wins. It's a team, but we do think that they're character guys, and we spend an awful lot of time making sure that, as best we can, we know that as people that they're going to fit into that room, because that's everything.
Bill, I want you to touch on the beginning with the goaltender situation, the goaltender department, just the fact that you have seen the track record over the last few years since you guys put that together. How much did that help with, obviously Spencer is a big guy to trade away, but just the confidence that you have knowing that they have a track record since they got here, that you can figure out ways that you're going to replace and be able to rebuild that position? Yeah,
it's a considerable tool, weapon, luxury that we enjoy. And I think if you look at the goalies who've been here, certainly since I've been here, whether it was Dreege or Alex Lyon, or Spence, or even Bob, the evolution of all of them to be the best goalies that they can be. And 100% of the credit goes to Lou and Robbie and Leo Luongo and Francois. And yeah, we're lucky, very lucky to have those gentlemen.
I wanted to ask you about, in terms of bringing in Brad and bringing all the moves that you made. A week ago, or 2 weeks ago, completely different situation. Matthew was healthy, salary cap was changed. In terms of like how you had to change your mindset, just after Matthew got hurt and you had different options now, how hard is it to go into like, oh, we're going to go into the trade deadline with this, and then everything changes? You've obviously made a lot of moves in that regard.
So I'll go back to the process that we use. It's you're already prepared for what if and whatever, because you know in the course of our meetings, in the course of our discussions, in the course of the weekly pro phone calls, you cover everybody. And so there's a what if you can you do this? When these situations present themselves, what would you do? And when we found out about Matthew and said, okay, we may have some more space, the narrative on each player was already written in our minds. So it was more of a, does this fit? Can that fit? Well, what's the cost? That type of thing. So it's not as onerous as you would think as far as what you want to do. actually getting it done is really a function of the other teams, who's available, and that type of situation.
Did you find that you were getting more calls after you had more cap space to work with?
I don't know. It's a pretty thorough process for everybody. So I have calls with people. I look at the roster, I look at the list, and there's no fit. For sure, right? I've got nothing to give them, and they've got nothing that I think I could get. And lo and behold, hey, would you take this guy? Oh, who knew? So that happens, and that's part of the process as well.
Bill, going back to Brad, obviously a big personality, joining a team full of big personalities. How excited are you to see just how he fits in the room of the groups? And obviously, since they're both rehabbing, I imagine he'll spend some time with Chucky early on. How beneficial do you think that would be in just terms of welcoming him into the group?
Yeah, I like I said, I haven't spoken to him yet, but I suspect that it's going to be a rather seamless. Our group is a very welcoming, very kind, and you guys know, I mean, it's a community, and they're very open, very concerned about each other, and I think they'll fit famously.
Bill, everybody knows your window is now. How much did that plan to you? Okay, we're going to make some big moves if it works out this trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head, right? Like if we have this opportunity now, and then we have the opportunity to get better and to improve. It's a decision that you make, and some of those picks that are gone later on, we're going to have to replenish or find alternative ways. Our scouts have been very, very adept at finding the free agents, at getting players to replace picks, and we'll continue to do that, and I suspect that we'll work even harder.
Thanks, guys, for taking a few more.
As a hockey fan, how much are you looking forward to being in that box and watching I can't say
I
the word,
think
but
all
getting
of
it all
us-
stirred up?
I mean, I think all of us are just looking forward to seeing, on the heels of the Four Nations, and you saw Sam Bennett and Marcy play together, and it's great for the sport, right? Like it's exciting, it's fun, and probably all of you, I would think, when you think about the hockey side of it and the fan side of it, the romantic love of the game, you smile. Like, this is going to be pretty fun.
And Matthew Tkachuk, you said the other day that he'll be obviously. Any updates on him in this past week?
No.
Do you feel like he'll be ready in the playoffs, or how's that?
The best I can say is I hope so. I'm not being coy. I don't know.
And one more thing about Boston, how much are they retaining money?
Yeah.
Like half, or half of it?
So great to hear from Bill there. Obviously, just lots of good stuff and expectations here for the Panthers once again to win the Stanley Cup. So if you want some more info, obviously FloridaPanthers.com, the Florida Panthers YouTube channel. There's lots of good clips, articles, things like that. Always check it out. And there will be more coming in the coming days and weeks, obviously, with all the good stuff happening here in South Florida. But Doug, one other thing I want to touch on here before we move on to some of the other moves is life and how crazy life is and moments are, especially in sports, because all this had me thinking was going back to the first round series 2 years ago when the Panthers upset the Bruins. And to me, the turning point for the Florida Panthers as a franchise in terms of moments was Sergei Bobrovsky stopping Brad Marchand on a breakaway in Game 5, tie game at the end of the third period. Of course, the Panthers
With
went on to win.
just seconds left.
Seconds. And he makes that save, and we talked about it immediately after that game, before we even knew the Panthers were going to win that series, that in Panthers history, that goal always goes in. It always gets scored, because the Panthers, that's just how things are for the Panthers. It always gets snatched away there at the end. So when that didn't happen, that's when you really start to think to yourself, you know what, maybe the Panthers can be the winning team, and all these things can work out for the Panthers. And ever since that save and that series, the Panthers have been on an insane trajectory, which of course resulted in the Stanley Cup last year, and of course back-to-back trips to the Stanley Cup Finals. But to go from that moment to now, the Bruins are heading towards, looks like, not making the playoffs. They sold off a bunch of guys, including their captain, to now their captain is now here with the Florida Panthers. Crazy. Who could have ever drawn that line from that moment to where we are right now? It's insanity. It's awesome.
It really is. The whole course of everything. That puck goes in the net, And who knows?
Bruins probably
where
win the
things
Stanley
look
Cup.
at
I
that
mean,
point in
Taylor
time.
Hall's talked about that a million times. He keeps saying if they would have beat us, they would have won the Stanley Cup. So who knows? Who knows where all the world goes?
So the Panthers with Brad Marchand now going to be an exciting look with Brad Marchand in the lineup, and just going through the rest. And when that happens, we'll wait and see, and we'll find out more as we go along here. But looking down the rest of the list, Jameson, Olive, we've talked about Brad Marchand. We've spent a lot of time already on Seth Jones. We know what we're getting there.
Yeah, if you want Seth Jones, go back to our other episode 2 episodes ago about Seth Jones.
Yeah, before the Jesper Boquist episode. And we still encourage everybody to go check out the Jesper Boquist episode, too. That was recently, and that was another under-the-radar now bit of business from earlier this week, getting him inked up for a couple of more years. But Nico Sturm signs, and I guess we should go chronologically. So the day before the Nico Sturm signing, Vitek Vanacek acquired from the San Jose Sharks for Patrick Giles. So he's going to go there, get a little bit more of an opportunity. But Vitek Vanacek, he's played on some really good teams. He's excited to be here. He's going to be the backup to Sergei Bobrovsky, it would seem. And there are going to be opportunities for a backup goaltender to play down the stretch here. The Panthers do have some back-to-backs, but he's a capable guy who's played a lot of NHL games, who's been on good teams. He's played playoff games. He's looking forward to being here, and there's always been an upside to Vitek Vanacek's game. And I think that's the biggest thing. He walked in, he knew exactly what the role was, and he was going to do anything that's asked of him to help this team be better.
Yeah, and I love that, like you said, he's already got the Panther stickers on his mask. A lot of goalies wait a little bit till that new mask comes in. He got to work right away.
I love when you see the goalie with the wrong color pads and the plain white mask after the trade. But no.
Arts and crafts right away, day one. He got it done. I'm sure the equipment staff helped him out with that. So shout out to Teddy Richards and those boys as well. But like you said, when it came to the Panthers trying to fill that void left by Spencer Knight's departure in the Seth Jones trade, all you really wanted was a veteran with experience. And he's got 181 career starts. He's played in 10 playoff games. He knows the scenarios. He knows the situations. And yes, his numbers aren't great with the Sharks and his last year in Jersey.
Nobody's
were. So it's just not how it works out. So you look
but
at
he's won games. His career win percentage is good. And I know he was on a good Washington team there for a while, got some support, but that's going to be similar to what he's going to have here.
It's going to, like we always say, fit. And the Panthers believe this is a guy that can come in here and fit when he's called upon. And Panthers only have, I think, 4 back-to-backs left, so he'll play a little bit before we get to the playoffs. But, of course, come playoff time, you expect it to be none other than Sergei Bobrovsky, who's been on a tear here, 9-1, save percentage 9-2 over his last 11 starts, save percentage over 940. He's getting to the zone. We know we're going to see playoff Bob come playoff time. So this is a guy, in terms of just a safety net, you can't ask for much more given the situation than a guy with 181 career starts, some playoff experience, and a 903 career save percentage. That's solid.
And that was Wednesday. Thursday, the Panthers, like a lot of teams, they went shopping at the Shark store this week. It was open for business in San Jose, and the Panthers got Nico Sturm from San Jose on Thursday. Loved this one. He's got a Stanley Cup ring, so he has championship experience. He's played a lot of big games, played playoff games. But Jameson, he's a big guy, and he is among the best face-off men in the National Hockey League. And I know that you have conflicting views of what the overall face-off stat means and wins and losses and how important that is. But when you get into the playoffs, when situations are magnified, and one draw, getting possession of a puck late in the game or winning a defensive zone draw where that can become so important to be able to have another guy who's a 55+% guy in the face-off circle. That's what you need come playoff time. And like I said, you can't put a price on that experience. This is a guy still right in the prime of his career who has won before and known what it means to play that role on a championship team.
Yeah, I love this move, and once again, it costs nothing for the Panthers to bring him in. Just a 4th-round pick in 2026, and they also got back a 2027 7th-round pick. So great. Didn't really cost anything to really kind of fortify your bottom 6. And the face-offs are the biggest thing. Yeah, he has 7 goals. We talked to him today. He said, he likes to show off from time to time, but he knows that's not his job. But 62.7% in the face-off circle. Best in the NHL among guys that have taken at least 250 face-offs. Yeah. Career-wise, always been good, but this year just beyond. And I asked Paul Maurice about that after practice today, and he said, it's huge because just like you mentioned, in the playoffs, come playoff time, every team you're playing against has an elite power play. They have elite players, and if you can win the draw when you need to win the draw and kill off 25, 30 seconds of an opposing power play, or you're at the end of a game and they've got a 6-on-5 advantage, they're trying to tie things up, and you can win the draw and get the clear. Face-offs are massive.
Yep.
And we learned that last year with Kevin Stenlund, who was so good at that, as both on the penalty kill, 5-on-5. And the Panthers, Tomas Nosek's done a great job, but in terms of guys winning faceoff, Sturm's, at least in the numbers, has got him beat this year. He's so good at that. So we'll see how that shakes out in the bottom six, who kind of gets those minutes. But the Panthers have options. And when it comes to the fourth line, you and I talked about this in the days leading up to the deadline. One of the Panthers' biggest strengths in the playoffs last year was they had like 2 fourth lines. They rotated guys in and out. Yeah, you had Kevin Stenlund as the main piece in the middle, but then you had Nick Cousins, Ryan Lomberg, Stevie Lorenz, and Kyle Okposo all getting time.
And whoever came in was always fresh.
Yep, and I think the Panthers have that now because you look at guys that could play on the fourth line when this team is fully healthy, and you have Tomas Nosek, you have Nico Sturm, you have AJ Greer, you have Jonah Gadjevich, you have Jesper Boquist, you have, I feel like I'm forgetting somebody that could also play down there, but I feel like that's a good list right there. I might be forgetting somebody. Honestly, when they're fully healthy, a guy like Evan Rodriguez or Atul Ostarina might be playing on the fourth line with how deep they are now, with not giving up guys to bring in these other star players. So regardless, the Panthers are going into the playoffs with lots of bodies, lots of NHL caliber players, lots of guys that can play the minutes they need. So Nico Sturm, to me, wasn't even a cherry on top. I think he was a real need and a real good add just for what he can bring to the PK and the faceoff circle.
The Panthers are... They have more. It never hurts to have depth at center. They have more centers than you need on a given night. So there are going to be guys playing the wing. They're going to have flexibility as far as who takes faceoffs on their strong side, things like that. It's good to have those options, and that's what it's all about. Options. The Panthers have options, and moving into the playoffs, deeper on defense. Jameson, I think, as we've seen so far, these first couple of games, obviously getting Seth Jones, that makes you deeper on defense as it is. But if Uvis Balinskis is your 7, that's a deep group of defense. And then we obviously just talked about it up front, adding Marchand, adding Nico Sturm. Goaltending depth. We haven't talked about Kaapo Kähkönen yet, but a guy with a good bit of NHL experience, and he's got some upside. We saw him play a game for the Wild against the Panthers a handful of years back. It might have been his first pro season here in North America, and stood on his head. Yeah. I've always thought there was great upside with Kaapo Kähkönen.
You hope you never need him, your third string goaltender, but if for some reason you need him to play a game, he's got 140 games of NHL experience. Yeah. That's great safety net for the Panthers.
That is great depth.
They're taking no risks. They want to make sure even their third stringer is a guy with experience.
Ever since everybody saw Vegas go like 5 deep down the depth chart there a few years back, I think it's just made everybody realize, hey, if you want to make a deep run, you might have to call on somebody you haven't called on before, and you want to make sure that when you call that guy's number that you're comfortable with them. And the Panthers they have multiple options that they're comfortable with, giving them minutes, giving them games if the situation presents itself. So A+ is across the board. I know this is the team podcast, but I think you're going to hear that from people across North America and all the hockey.
I've gone through all the articles,
the talking heads, all the opinion leaders. I think the Panthers are going to be getting a ton of praise here, and I think it all goes back to, like I said, if you can supplement the roster like the Panthers have without sacrificing anything off your night-to-night lineup, that is a huge win for a team that once again has championship aspirations. So again, A+ is across the board. There are a few other teams in different positions in their development and the standings and things like that I also think did a good job, but the Panthers are going to be one of the teams that draw the most praise. I have no doubt about that.
Yep, and I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Obviously, 20 or so games left here for the Cats. We'll see how it shakes out, Doug, but like you said, some other teams definitely around the league worthy of praise or maybe some eyebrow raising. So moving on past the Panthers here, looking around the league for this deadline, anything that stood out to you, any moves that were made or weren't made that caught your eye? Because I got a couple.
Well, keeping it within the region, I did like what Tampa Bay did. That move acquiring Yanni Gordon, Oliver Bjorkstrand, I thought was big for them. Remember on Monday night when they played the Panthers, they went 11-7. Their forward depth was maybe not what it has been in the past. Adding those two guys, giving up a fourth liner in Mikey Eyssimont. They have guys at the minor league level in Syracuse they can call up. I think that roster got better adding those two players, so that was a big one. Obviously, we can't forget to mention the Dallas Stars. Anytime you add a player like Mikko Rantanen to the mix, that is a pretty loaded lineup.
With only giving up Logan Stankoven, who's
still a prospect. He's an NHL player, but he's still right at the beginning of his NHL career.
And some first-round picks. To give up that to get a guy not only for this year, but like you said, at a contract that's going to be the age very well for them for the foreseeable future. Great move by Dallas. And we know what, Doug? Love that it's in the Western Conference. Get him out of the East. Great for us.
Colorado, and I think this goes beyond deadline day. This goes back to the Blackwood trade. You look at what Chris McFarland's been able to do there in Colorado since the Blackwood trade. They add a starting goalie, get him inked up with term. Leading up to the deadline, adding Brock Nelson, adding Charlie Coyle. Casey Middlestat was moved out. Adding Ryan Lindgren on the back end, adding Jimmy Vesey to the depth forward group. That's suddenly the Colorado Avalanche, and of course, Natchez from the Rantanen trade, and Jack Drury's a part of that from the Rantanen trade. Suddenly, the Colorado Avalanche, who for the first couple of months and going back the last couple of seasons, since they won the Cup in 2022, I think the knock on them has always been, they're really good team, really dangerous, a bit top-heavy. I think the Avalanche lineup, that's not a top-heavy lineup anymore. That's a pretty deep club for the rest of this season, what they've been able to put together. So I think full marks to the Colorado Avalanche as well. It's going to be a gauntlet getting out of the Western Conference now because Winnipeg, that's a contender. Of course, we mentioned Colorado. We mentioned Dallas. Vegas is really good. You still have the Edmonton Oilers
But oddly
out there.
enough, Vegas didn't make the Vegas move.
They didn't make the big splash. They went out and got a familiar face, Riley Smith.
Yeah, but their Twitter account was tweeting stuff all day, teasing. Nothing ever came. Everyone was literally saying Brad Marchand to Vegas until suddenly he was in Florida.
I think a lot of big names got rumored to Vegas just because they're Vegas, and historically it's what they've done. But I think they're still a strong team. But I think the teams, as far as the lead up to the deadline, the Panthers, the Avalanche, the Stars. If you're looking at there's a retool going on in Boston. We won't be able to fully grade the work of Don Sweeney there until you start to see what their lineup looks like the rest of the year and going into next season. They still are locked in with a lot of those big guys, Pasternak, McAvoy, Jeremy Swayman, obviously, Lindholm. So they can't strip the whole thing down to the studs. It's going to have to be a bit of the old retool rather than the rebuild. But they made a lot of moves. We'll see how all that plays out. So those are just a few of the ones that stuck out. I'm sure I named a couple that you had in mind.
Yeah, you got through a good amount, and a couple other people that I want to mention are, I got to give some love to the San Jose Sharks. Like you said, a lot of people went shopping at the Shark store, and I think the Sharks made out really well. I mean, you get a first-round pick for Jake Wallman, who I believe, got a second-round pick to take from the Red Wings not too long ago. That's great. They did a good job picking up some prospects and picks, and without really disrupting the guys that I think are really kind of helping Celebrini and lifting him up. So they're doing it right there.
Celebrini, Smith, Askarov, they've got the pieces, like the
and they're
preliminary cornerstones
the right
are there, yeah.
So a good deadline for them to add some more assets moving forward, whether they use to draft or to trade, or we'll see what happens. Regardless, I like what the Sharks are doing their rebuild. Maple Leafs, they didn't make a splash, but you get Scott Lawton, who is obviously one of the top bottom six options on the market. You get Brandon Carlo from the Bruins. You fill two positions of need on a team that's already good and feels like they can win the Cup. That's fine. For them, I think going into the postseason, it's going to come down to their goaltending. Two guys that haven't done it the whole way, whether it's Joseph Woll or Anthony Stolarz, two great goaltenders, especially Stoli, as we know.
Numbers are good for both.
One of the best in the league this year, Stoli is, but two guys that haven't had to carry the full load in a deep playoff run yet. So that's maybe the only question mark. But other than that, Leafs have a solid team. We know they're going to be good. You look at the Ottawa Senators, you trade away Josh Norris. Obviously, Dylan Cousins is only, I think, 2 seasons removed from a 60-point season. He's a good piece for them that they feel like they can build around. But you trade away one of Brady Tkachuk's good friends. Don't know how you feel about that.
Did you see the media availability that Brady had afterward?
Didn't seem happy about it.
He was, you could tell that was an emotional Brady Tkachuk.
And he's the one guy you're supposed to keep happy. So I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see. Obviously, they're right in the thick of the playoff hunt. They can make the playoffs this year. We'll see if this move pays off, and they do. If that's the case, everyone moves on, and it's great, and suddenly they took a big step forward this year. One team I'm a little confused about, and maybe I just don't know enough about the team, Washington Capitals. They bring in Anthony Beauvillier, and he's a fine forward depth addition.
I thought a second-rounder was a pretty high price for Beauvillier, who's bounced around a bit, but he's got a lot of offensive upside.
Yeah, but once again, though, they're in first in the Eastern Conference. Ovechkin's not getting any younger. They look like a team that can contend this year, and that's kind of the only ad they really make. I thought maybe they have about $3 million cap space from what I'm seeing.
In their defense, I don't think they had to do a whole lot. I don't think their lineup has any glaring holes in it.
But they didn't do like the over the like the Panthers. Did the
Right.
Panthers need to do what they did? No, but they're loading up and going for it.
Yep.
They could win they could have won without doing these moves, but they know they're in a better spot by
I'm
doing
going to
these
go ahead
moves.
and guess with Washington, it was one of those situations where they weren't going to force the move, and nothing really just worked out for them. I'm just going to guess that that's the way it
Maybe,
went.
but that's the one thing. I thought they'd make a splash and be like, this is us officially going for it, and to hype everyone up there. So, once again, not a loser by any means, but just a little bit of a surprise. And then one team that I will say, in my mind, obviously loser would be the Carolina Hurricanes, just for giving up a great guy, Marty Netchus, for Mikko Rantanen. Marty Netchus, let's not forget, is another year after this one, too, on that contract. They
Remember,
they have to move Mikko.
It was a shaky relationship with Nate just going back to the offseason, it sounds
Yeah.
like. But he was playing very well there.
He was their best forward at the time in terms of points. So, and only 26, so really kind of coming into his prime. Things didn't work out with Rantanen, but then again, I'm fine with you taking that swing initially if you think it's going to work out.
I'm all for taking the swing. I will never fault them for that.
But then you only get Logan Stankoven, like we said, nice young player, and 2 first-round picks. So for them, it's going to come down to what can you do with those 2 first-round picks. You have a window now. I feel like you got to move those picks and try to get players to help this team now, or else suddenly you're building 2 different windows.
When I saw them get the 2 first-round picks, I was thinking, okay, the Hurricanes are going to have those 2 first-round picks for about 30 minutes. Those things are heading elsewhere. And nothing happened. So they're going to be taking those 2 first-round picks into the offseason.
But looking at overall, like you said, I really think the Lightning did a great job getting better, and that's going to be a tough team to get through in the playoffs.
And Bjorkstrand signed for next year, too.
He is, and I think Yanni Gourde, after spending some time away from Tampa Bay, is going to take a nice deal to stay in Tampa Bay
Agreed.
after this year, so that's not a surprise. But if I'm going through and I'm picking legitimate contenders, teams that can win the Cup post-deadline, I'm saying Panthers, Maple Leafs, Lightning, Capitals, Jets, Stars, Avalanche, Golden Knights, Oilers. That's probably it.
That's my 9, too. That's my top 9.
I was thinking about the Wild, but I'm not going to put them in there.
That's my top 9, and we have the same top 4 and top 5 groupings in each conference.
Yeah.
I agree with you there. Are there other teams that are dangerous? Are there teams that could make noise if they got in? If the Rangers get in and they, if they get in, could they stun somebody in round 1 because of Igor? Absolutely possible. And you still have elite players there that maybe just haven't, for the entirety of this season, lived up to the expectations. They're dangerous, no doubt about it, but I'm with you. I think we have the same top 4 in the East, the same top 5 in the West as far as who we would, and the reason we're doing 4 in the East, 5 in the West, that's who I agree would be the top tier contenders.
And if you disagree, let us know at Jameson Coop, at Doug Plagens on Twitter.
At Jameson Coop, at Doug Plagens. The other thing I want to roll out there to the folks, if you can think, we were talking about it, some of us in the media room, but if you can think of other instances, fun instances, when a player was traded from one side of a rivalry to the other side of a rivalry like this. And I was just racking my brain. We were talking about some of the other instances. Johnny Damon, Red Sox to Yankees, but that was a free agent signing.
Well, now you have Rantanen to Dallas, but indirectly.
Yes.
By way of Carolina, by way of 12 or 13 games in Carolina.
The Rantanen Canes jerseys, wonder what those are going for. I wonder how many they actually sold.
Probably a lot. Because you do that, when a guy signs you make a lot of business off that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there was...
How many Brad Marchand Panther jerseys will be sold?
I'm going to go ahead and guess there's already been an order for a handful.
There's already a lot of Boston Bruins natives in South Florida that like to come to games when the Bruins are in town still. That if the Bruins aren't in the playoffs, are they going to do the unthinkable and hop on the bandwagon with Panthers Brad Marchand jerseys? I think yes. I'm
going to go ahead and guess here, Jameson, because obviously, and a reminder, Panthers Sabres Saturday night, 6 o'clock, Amerant Bank Arena. Hope to see you there. FloridaPanthers.com, SeatGeek.com, 954-835-PUCK. Panthers play their next 6 on the road after this one. When the Panthers come back after playing those 6 road games, there will be at least one Marchand 63 Panthers jersey somewhere out in the crowd. That's enough time to get the thing printed up.
I think there might be. I'm going to scout from the press.
You think there might be one tomorrow?
There might be one tomorrow. We'll see.
Well, you can go to Pantherland and get the thing made up at the game.
You can go see my boy Ryan at Pantherland and get one made.
You can go do it right there at the game. If you do, let us know. Let us know. Maybe you were the first one to get one. But by the time the Panthers play another home game after tomorrow, there's going to be a smattering. I'm going to go ahead and guess. So that's a wrap on this one. Trade deadline edition of the Territory Talk podcast. Big news. We're excited. Panthers acquiring Brad Marchand right before the deadline, and then, of course, a number of other players who figure to be key contributors heading down the stretch here. It's exciting, best time of the year, and the Panthers are gearing up for another Stanley Cup push. Doug Plagens, Jameson Olive here with you, folks. This has been the Territory Talk Podcast Trade Deadline Edition presented by Baptist Health, the official sports medicine provider of the Florida Panthers. We will talk to you next time.